Before we get into today's episode, I wanted to make you aware of a new online course I am offering through the University of Lynchburg's Professional Development Institute. The course is called Thriving Community Arts Strategies for Sustainable Success. This 8-week program will empower professionals and volunteers with the knowledge and skills needed to foster and sustain successful arts initiatives in small communities. There will be interactive online sessions, national research, and practical assignments that are designed to build a robust understanding of the unique challenges and opportunities within our small American communities. There's a link in the show notes to more information about the course and where and how to sign up. I also want to make you aware of a reduced nonprofit rate. You can receive more information about that rate by sending an email to pdi@lynchburg.edu. Again, that's pdi@lynchburg.edu. And now for this month's episode. You are listening to the Small Town Big Arts podcast. I'm your host, Jeffrey Kirshner, the CEO of the Academy Center of the Arts in Lynchburg, Virginia. In my own work as an arts leader, I have found it difficult to access resources for arts organizations and artists serving smaller communities. On each episode, Small Town Big Arts sets out to drive conversations and provide inspiration for those serving smaller communities through the arts. If you like what you hear, please rate and review us and share with your friends and colleagues who are working to promote the arts in smaller communities across America. You can also learn more by visiting us at smalltownbigarts.com. All right. Well, I am still here at the Radically Rural Conference for Small Town Big Arts this week. This has been always a great conference. I would highly recommend those in the field to come out. In fact, I'm even thinking about, I've been talking to the organizers about possibly doing a pre-conference for arts leaders and arts organizations in small communities next year's conference, maybe the day before the official conference starts. So stay tuned for information about that. So I'm speaking with two leaders while I'm here at the conference. I spoke with the Lupinwood leader, Andrew Huckins, yesterday, and now I am very excited to speak with Roy Schlieben, who is the founding member and current director of MAXT Makerspace, which is located in Peterborough, New Hampshire, which is a population of about 6,400. They also have a ceramic studio in Dublin, and we're going to get a bit into that as we discuss his work with MAXT today. He has a vast amount of experience in community development. We may hopefully get a little bit into that, conflict resolution overseas, all kinds of exciting stuff. But we are here to talk about MAXT today. And that's what I want to dive into. So Roy, thank you so much for joining me. And I think to begin, just tell me a little bit about yourself and how you got to MAXT. I think it's a fascinating story, and we'll kind of jump off from there.
Yeah, well, thank you for having me, Jeff. It is a sort of a long and winding road how I became the leader of this makerspace. It's not something I thought I would end up doing at any point until it happened. I grew up in Peterborough, New Hampshire. Went to school there. Left, pursue some interests that I had in working overseas, like you mentioned. I worked in Morocco. I worked in Sub-Saharan Africa, doing conflict resolution work. I worked in Thailand for a while, for about 5 years, doing work in combating the trade of wildlife, which was very interesting, and also has a community sort of engagement aspect to it. Sort of a family tragedy. My dad died, brought me back home. And with my family, we settled back in Peterborough, and just sort of my community development mind sort of kicked in as soon as I was back. I joined the Rotary Club.
Yes.
I did community sort of engagement work. And this idea of a makerspace was sort of percolating. There was a community forum that was organized by a group in Peterborough that brought in a makerspace leader from Nashua, New Hampshire. And it was very inspiring. We had like 100 people come out to that talk. And it, as soon as it ended, a group of us formed a committee. There's like, let's talk about how could we do this in Peterborough. It, there was no model that other than other maker spaces that were sort of in urban areas to go by. So we sort of like, what's that but here? Like it's just it was hard to translate it. So what we did was we started just doing events, doing sort of maker type events, doing like hacker kind of things. We did art, like let's make t-shirts, like let's do wearables like Arduino, stuff like that. And then after a while of just doing events, we sort of had enough momentum and enough engagement with the community to say, okay, we could put together, an actual space. It wasn't very much. It was a storefront on a strip mall, but it gave us visibility, which is good. It gave us a place to come and meet and start collecting more resources in the form of tools and equipment that you normally think of when you think of a makerspace. We were all volunteers. We just kept it going as best we could. Rent was low. We didn't have much overhead. So we just kept it going and just more and more people got involved. And you had like sort of different groups, come and start using the space. We had a theater group and, like musicians come and use the space.
How are they using the space? We're out of curiosity.
So like theater, you need to make props.
Yeah.
You need, a space to rehearse stuff. And we had a space that was relatively inexpensive and there wasn't a lot of other options.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
we were just sort of the thing in town that had that. We were open to anybody who was sort of creative to come in and access whatever resources we had, which wasn't a lot, but it was obviously something. It was enough to draw people in. So after that, we became sort of more of a real nonprofit. Our board grew. They hired me as a staff member, and we moved to a bigger space where we had, sort of real shops, wood shop, uh, fiber arts studio. We had a robotics club move in, and they sort of started using our space as their own maker space to make their robots. It's like a high school group.
Yeah.
We had like a laser cutter, and that was exciting to people to get access to like this $12,000 piece of equipment. We had a welding group.
Yeah, which we're going to get into a little bit too about all that. Yeah, yeah, yeah. We're going to talk about that.
Which, when we started out at that new space, that was, helped get us a lot of attention. And
yeah, and let's hold that thought because I want to get to that in a little bit.
Sure.
And so I think as we get into this, because I want to, Roy's getting to some things that I want to get into in regards to early organizations getting off the ground and some things that can happen with those types of organizations in regards to what I will say maybe is like mission drift a little bit is maybe what we'll maybe say for right now. But in some regards, I think not the welding itself, but we'll talk about how the welding was happening. But I want to talk really quick though too for people to give them a sense of the community that you're in. Tell me a little bit about Peterborough. So I know we mentioned that it has 6,400 residents, but tell me about the culture of it. It is home to you too, or where you grew up.
Yeah.
That is a common story that I will hear a lot with arts and in this case, Makerspace, cultural nonprofit leaders in rural spaces. Very often they are boomerangs. They're returning back to home, and therefore their relationship to that place is deeper. It's more connective. It's not passive.
Mhm.
But tell me about Peterborough. Tell me about where you're from.
Sure. Peterborough is a beautiful place. And having traveled throughout the world, you sort of gain an appreciation of a place that's sort of like a quaint New England town. It's quiet, very, I would say artsy in a way, because it has these really big arts institutions that have, sort of helped Peterborough grow. There's the McDowell Colony, which is this big artist residence, I guess, I don't know what you call it. It's people come there to work on their
The artist residency program. Yeah.
artsy program.
Yeah.
So there's that. There's the Peterborough Players, which is a big summer playhouse that attracts actually big name actors to come and perform during the summer. There is this place that's no longer there, and we can talk about it, but it was called Sharon Arts Center, which drew a lot of visual artists to the area as a place to teach and access some resources like ceramics, ceramic studio, print studio, things like that.
Okay. Let's stop on that because I want to talk about you said it's the Sharon Arts Center?
Yeah, it was called Sharon Arts. Yeah.
Yes, I want to talk about the Sharon Arts Center because one of the things that came up in the panel that Roy was on yesterday was that and correct me if I'm wrong on this, some of the energy behind MAXT was that the Sharon Arts Center closed.
Yeah.
So, I spent a lot of time discussing on the podcast, how organizations create longevity, what is the value proposition? Organizations often will go through a kind of life cycle. So this isn't uncommon for an organization to close, but I think because this is these are resources for small communities, arts organizations. Tell me a little bit about the Sharon Arts Center, what happened there, and then how you all sort of rose up from the ashes of that, if that is kind of a correct way to maybe somewhat say it. Yeah.
So Sharon Arts Center, it was started by a group of artists, I believe about 60 years ago now. And it was sort of like in this beatnik and then hippie sort of commune group. And at the beginning, it was just very like loose and just trying to create a place where artists could teach and practice. And I think because of the area that we're in, a lot of artists were looking for a place like that, coming from like New York City or Boston and settling in the
romanticism of the rural area.
Yeah. So Sharon Arts sort of drew those people in, and it became, stronger and stronger over the decades. And they had this, beautiful campus that was tucked away in the woods, not even in Peterborough. It's this town called Sharon. That's why it's called Sharon Arts Center.
Okay.
And but it's really out of the way. And obviously I wasn't part of that organization, so I don't know all the details, but from what I understand, they got a little bit top heavy operationally. They were basically trying to support themselves through large donors towards the end of their life cycle. And those large donors wanted to they didn't want to have to give this arts organization $100,000, $300,000 every year to support it. It didn't seem like a sustainable model anymore. And the reasons for that, there might be many. I think organizations naturally, like nonprofit organizations naturally have a life cycle. And it's really hard to avoid sometimes that overhead.
Can I speak to that really
I'm
quick?
sure you know a lot.
Yeah, I mean, so I think what I'm hearing probably happened, right, is, the donor dollars that exist for organizations are often, the kind of quick way I would sort of explain it is that donors, communities, collective action around an organization will sustain itself when the value proposition for the organization is high. I can't speak to exactly what happened there, and Roy was not on the inside of it. This is just my guess. My guess is probably the value proposition began to decrease over time. It was sustaining an administrative staff, but maybe the work that was being done wasn't connecting to the community on the level that it once had. And so therefore, right, the dollars start to dwindle, the ability to sustain the organization starts to change over time. I would say probably and where I want to bring MAXT into this conversation is I heard from your story, the origins were that 100 people showed up to hear about a makerspace, right? So right there was a value proposition that was high. People saw and heard something that was exciting to them, that they thought the community needed. And then in turn, right, the community is going to turn around and go, that has high value. I want to participate in that. I want to support that. I want to give dollars to that. And something along the way, the Sharon Arts Center, which again, it can't happen naturally over time if people don't evolve, right? Like if the organization doesn't evolve, the organization doesn't meet the moment, then that will happen. I think it's sort of a lesson. So you all come in, and I think what's been exciting to what I've heard is that the value proposition was high. So tell me about how you all have, because the arts are really important to a community, the ability to express, to connect. And one of the things that happened early for you all was getting into ceramics, which often does fit into the maker space. It's one of the places where I think there's a lot of interesting crossover between maker spaces and arts organizations. I think when we think about creativity, creating things, coming together in community, there's a lot of either close cousins or really the same. And a ceramic studio is a great example. Very often we see ceramic studios exist within arts organizations, art centers, but we also see them exist in maker spaces. So Dublin, New Hampshire is where the ceramics component is of what you all do. So talk a little bit about how, as the Sharon Arts Center closes, you all come up and how you began to maybe fill a community need that had real value.
Yeah, so Sharon Arts Center closed in 2019, but they had been sort of on the decline for a while there. They had been taken over by a college, and so was becoming a little bit more closed off from our local community, and more of just a resource that the college was using. So that sort of decline started maybe 10, 12 years ago. When it was finally closed, there was a group of, they were called the Sad Potters. That's what they called themselves, because they had no longer had a place to go to practice what they loved doing. And they didn't have like the kilns or the, that community that they had loved was taken away. I think that community part was the biggest part that they were missing. So we saw that. We worked with our partner Arts Alive, which is a arts supporting organization.
Yeah, it's a fiscal sponsor arts organization.
Yeah, and we sort of discussed, well, is there anything that MAXT can do? This, our organization, which was also just getting started, can do to support these potters. And we started having meetings with them. Also, hundreds of people were coming to these meetings, because even though maybe Sharon Arts Center had declined, those people who loved it or had benefited from it at some point were still there in the community, and wanted something, but also wanted something that was more vibrant and active. And the Makerspace was sort of this exciting new thing that they were already tuned into and wanted to be part of. So we worked with this group. We found a new place where we could feasibly offer, the ceramics resources that they were looking for, in a space that was not like too expensive, that was presented in a way that was attractive to maybe a new generation of potters and in the area. And we set it up. It was a long process to do that. But in the end, it's become probably the most vital part of our organization.
Yeah, I noticed that. I noticed that on your website on the calendar, it was a lot of ceramics listings.
Yeah.
And there are a couple of things I want to point out about what Roy just shared. They were responsive, so they were listening to the community. They saw a need, and then they met that need. And when they met that need, then there is a value that is provided, and then that value, which is clear to that community, is seen, and everybody can rally around it. Ryan and I were talking briefly a little bit before this started about ceramics because my own organization, the Academy Center of the Arts, we have a pottery studio, and it really exploded during the COVID period and has continued on. We can't meet the demand, and my feeling about this, and this is kind of a question too, just in terms of makerspaces in general, because I think there's probably some tie-ins here. But one of the things that I found with the ceramic studio that I think made it so popular, one was the tactile nature of it. I think people wanted to work with their hands. We live in a digital age. People were stuck in their houses on computers, and they really wanted to like touch things, but they also wanted to share space with other people.
Mm-hmm.
And I think one of the things that I find with ceramics is that it's low stake social engagement, right? Like you can be in a room and you can work on a project. And if you want to talk to somebody, or if something sort of just kind of naturally occurs in conversation, it can occur, and you can connect to people, you can get to know them, but the stress around the social connection is low, right? There's like, you walk in and like, it's not like a cocktail party where you're expected to go talk to people. You're in there to work on your project. And if you happen to, connect with somebody over to that project, or talk to them, or learn that you have something common, that inherently these sort of really easygoing social connections can happen that people, I think, were really thirsty and hungry for. We often advise people when they move to the area, they're trying to meet people. It's like, try the pottery studio. I would imagine some similar things would be across mediums in a makerspace, right? Where people are there working on projects, but they inherently form community by sharing that space, right?
There's a couple, other like crafts that I think fall into that category, like knitting, there's knitting circles.
Yeah.
Social thing.
Yeah.
It's not all about just making something. It's about, sort of sharing a community, sort of that aspect of it. I think of quilting, and even like wood turning is another sort of, it's very tactile. It's very like, it's fun to sort of share. So many different ways that craft, you can use that craft to create different things. So those are sort of, yeah. And then when we started talking about doing pottery, like it was amazing. It was during the pandemic. Like you said, like it was so undeniably something that people wanted to do, that we had one of our instructors set up an outdoor pottery studio before we even had a space. We just set it up under some tents. Everybody brought their own wheel. We started teaching classes. They all sold out. It was like crazy. It was just amazing. Like I had no connection to that world until then, and I was just like, oh wow, this is something. There's a lot there.
Yeah.
I got into it myself.
Oh, that's great. That's great.
Yeah, I mean, my daughter got into it.
Yeah.
My wife got into it. It was just, everybody, you got, you start working with clay, and there's just, it's so much fun. It's relaxing, but also stimulating. There's a lot to it.
Yeah.
So
so along these lines, I think what I love about this organization, we sort of hear about an arts organization whose value proposition began to fade. This new organization comes in. It's an organization sort of meeting the moment, right? We have certain circumstances in and around this time period in American history, and social connectivity, responses to digital environments, and the need to make stuff, as well as we think about workforce development, I'm sure too, in terms of certain skill sets. So this value proposition is very clear. One of the things I heard in the panel yesterday that you brought up, somebody there was a question that was asked about, something if you could change something, and the rule that they made was, which I thought was a smart rule, that the person asking the question said it can't be about just money, right? Because if we all say like we could have something change in our circumstances, just have more money, that we could do more of the things that we need to do. But you were forced to sort of to answer a different question that wasn't around money. And the thing that you mentioned was really marketing communication, the ability to get the value of what you do and the activity of that out into the community. So let's talk a little bit about that, because I mean, as we're sitting here, I'll share too. Roy has this incredible T-shirt it has this mixtape on it, splattered paint. It's awesome. It says Peterborough Night Market 24. We might probably naturally get into talking about the night market that you all do, which I think would be helpful for people to hear about, promotion and energy collection. But talk to me a little bit about that, what you talked about yesterday, about the frustrations that can exist. Maybe it's not, maybe it's small community specific, maybe it's not, maybe it's just the digital world we live in. But talk a little bit about sharing the message of who you are, the value you provide, and the difficulties in that.
Yeah, I mean, just over the 10 years we've been doing this, it feels like just media, the local rural media market has just gotten more and more fragmented. Obviously, we all know that newspapers are on the decline. Not many people read them. I was talking, I talked to like some of our younger members, and I'm like, how do you find out about things? Because you don't read the newspaper. A lot of them are just done with social media, maybe Instagram, but like they don't like look at Facebook anymore.
Yeah.
Like what?
Yeah. And TikTok is really not a marketing platform. They're on TikTok, but TikTok's like
local.
Yeah, it's a story. It's very national storytelling based stuff. Yeah.
So I'm like, how do you find out about things? And they're like, I guess like word of mouth. Like it's really hard to reach the people who we're trying to reach. And meet them where they're at. So we've figured out some ways to do that. One is just providing, going to the organizations we know they're at and partnering with them and just showing where we intersect with the services they might be getting elsewhere, like at obviously schools, but also sort of community welfare organizations, housing organizations. We're talking to like Catholic Charities, who's putting up a big housing development that's sort of for low to moderate income individuals, and how can we offer services for their residents, things like that.
Yeah.
And then we go out into the community and try to do big events as well. The biggest being Night Market, which
Yes, tell us what night market is.
Night market is this idea. I lived in Thailand, as I mentioned, and there was this awesome night market in Bangkok, which I was sort of inspired by. And all it is, it's just a big craft market, but you also have music and food and art, and life is just happening like in a very condensed space. So the downtown of Peterborough is not like a huge city. It's a small downtown, but I was able to sort of like look at it and see, okay, we can just take all these parking lots here in the middle of town and just put a lot of stuff in.
Yeah.
And activities, and we had games, and I just tried to bring in as many of the creative people that I had met, and get them involved in this one night of fun and excitement. And that sort of was the first time people heard of us, in a lot of situations.
Is that a free? It's a free event to the public.
Free
festival. Yeah. And I'll share really fast. I know from community organizing work that my wife does. She runs a Main Street America program. Is that free family events are so rare, and very often in smaller communities there's not a lot of like government subsidy for them, and or sometimes the human capital to sort of execute them. So that's a high value to a community to have that, something like that they can attend and go to and be a part of, that gets them out of the house. I love this as an idea that I would sort of send out into the world for folks is that, if you're looking to promote, right? And again, it's a value proposition thing. You're providing something that has value to people. I'm sure it's great for the vendors too, an opportunity for them. So it's just and I love that this idea came from your experience in Thailand. It's very like, I don't know. It's really fantastic. But I do think a helpful tool for people to hear in regards to, I concur. Facebook sucks. Um, you know what I mean? I mean, Facebook obviously is a somewhat of a necessary evil in some regards in the work that we do. A lot of the social media is, I mean, we have to kind of use it. We have to engage in it. But man, when things are like real world things, and it is true, word of mouth is absolutely number one.
Yeah.
Number one, right? People who know you, telling you, from restaurants to shopping to cultural experiences, right? It's going to come from the people you know. So I wanted to share that, and I would really encourage folks to go. We'll share Max's website information in the show notes as well as at the end of the podcast. But go to the website, see information about it. I assume it's all there. We'll get social media. Ironically, we'll get your social media handles too, so people can take a look at it.
Gotta do it.
But I do say we're kind of looking for inspiration. I think this is a thing that's really worth taking a look at. So I'm going to get to a question that happiness was the very first question, but I want to dig into it a little bit more because I want to dig into it by starting by sharing what I believe is your mission statement. So correct me if I'm wrong on this. Mm-hmm. A makerspace is a gathering. Well, you see this in the front of the website, so maybe it's not the mission statement specifically, but I kind of took this as a mission. Mm-hmm. A makerspace is a gathering point for people to share resources and knowledge, work on projects, network, and build businesses. Okay. Is that kind of in the...
Yeah, I mean that's more of like sort of description of what we are to the layperson.
It's an identity.
Yeah. What's a makerspace?
This is what it is.
That's where I look at it.
So there's a couple things in here that I grabbed onto when I heard you discuss some struggles that you all had as a startup. And I do think we have people out there perhaps thinking about starting an organization in a smaller community. And one of the things that's inevitably going to happen is that you're going to have volunteer board. Mm-hmm. And that volunteer board is going to be important to how you execute your work, how you build capacity, governance, all the rest of it. But all of those individuals are going to have their own sort of somewhat subjective ideas of who and what you are. And it's really important, right, that there's some framework that sort of are guiding principles that kind of keep you on the tracks and that you can point to when people get off the tracks. And it happens all the time, everywhere. It's anybody dealing with a board who you have, 1, 2, 3, 4 board members, right, that at points are sort of telling you should be doing a thing or a thing should be happening or sort of pushing something in a direction where maybe it shouldn't go. And the big thing that I really held on to here in the description was shared resources, right? So that inherently says, okay, you're in a space where you're having to share space with other people. And so that is a big part of how it operates and how it works. You are not in isolation doing your own thing. The other thing was that you're a network, right? Mm-hmm. And that is connected to that too. There's a network of people, right? And there has to be some sort of equilibrium or balance that exists where these things sort of coexist. So now, you had alluded to this earlier, I want to get a little bit into the story of the welding program. Which when we talk about welding is a common component of a makerspace. And so, not in any way am I saying like a makerspace, nor is Roy saying makerspace shouldn't have welding. It makes a ton of sense. But tell me a little bit about what happened with the welding program and how that maybe ran counter to this idea of shared resources in a network.
Okay, so when you start like an arts organization, like a makerspace, it could be a lot of things. There is like a lot of options that you can move in, and there's no, I was not operating with any sort of roadmap, as I mentioned. It's just we were trying to figure it out as we go along, and that can be really exciting, and that excites a lot of people, and a lot of people want to join you in that mission, but you are vulnerable to drifting off course of what might work and your sort of values that you started with. So what happened with this welding program? We had a board member and their partner get involved, and they were super excited about what we were doing. And they had this idea to start a welding program that would teach the next generation of welders, sort of workforce development program. And that was super exciting to everybody who heard about it. Like that sounds amazing. And yes, we can host that in our makerspace. We'll have welding equipment there. Our members can use it, but then we'll have this welding program that, can help help people learn how to weld. Makes sense. There doesn't seem to be any problem with that. But what happened was, as an organization, we didn't police that enough in the way that it became, we have limited resources as an organization, and those resources became more and more eaten up by this one part of the organization. So in terms of our space, like half of our space was becoming taken over by this welding program, which was very popular and successful, which is good. But when it's taking over spaces that other people in your community want to use, that starts to rub people the wrong way. And then because it was becoming more popular, it was being none of that welding equipment was used by our members. It was just used by that program, and they weren't really willing to share it as much with our community as we thought they would want to be. And they were making, there's smoke and noise and all this other stuff that goes around along with welding. And it was becoming the overwhelming aspect of the whole organization. It's like, oh yeah, MAXT, it's that welding. It's like, no. We're a makerspace, we have, we have to switch up, blah. But it was sort of taking over the whole organization. And at a certain point, what actually happened was the board member basically said, well, my partner should just take over the whole makerspace. Like, I think he should be the makerspace manager. And of course that rubbed me the wrong way. Makerspace manager. But it was also like, to everybody else on the board, it was sort of a come to Jesus moment. Oh, like, this is maybe we've drifted off course here. This is not really what we've got set up to do. So eventually, we said, no, we can't do that. We can't let that happen. And then we sort of negotiated a way for that welding program to find their own space and thrive elsewhere outside of the makerspace. It was a loss for us because, that was
a tough decision to make.
That program was bringing in money and attention and, like goodwill. At the same time, internally, it was causing a lot of chaos and discord among everybody else who was trying to use our space. So it was that decision was really hard, but you have to make it sometimes.
Well, and this is an example too, mission drift. I think this could have easily, to your point, could have overtaken the whole thing, and it would have become something else. And then you would have been away from the mission. And then ultimately there would have been a welding program, but you wouldn't be providing what you were providing. And I would make an argument, there's a value proposition clearly for the welding program. But the value proposition of shared resources network, everything we talked about, right? That a more generalized makerspace, and particularly I would say in a smaller community, right, where there are limited resources and you're supplying a bunch of limited resources to folks, to sort of diminish the rest of those resources would have ultimately hurt the larger picture, and why the makerspace had value in the first place. So I really thought that was a really helpful story to hear in the context of really the purpose of what you all do. So as we wrap up, Roy, I'd love to hear what's next for MAXT. I know you all are making plans and actions are underway. Share us, and I think this is a really hopeful story. I mean, I think we have an organization that is in a community of 6,400. It's being responsive. It's listening to the community, plugging in things that make sense, making tough choices when things may not align with the mission, and finding ways, creative ways of marketing and building community connection and awareness. And then out of that comes growth. It comes visibility, being invited to Radically Rural conferences to speak as a panelist. So tell me what's next for MAXT? What's going on?
Yeah, so I think 10 years in, we have, in a lot of ways, matured as an organization. Our board is stable now. We had a strategic planning, retreat to actually like think about, okay, oh, what are we doing here? Like, oh, what is this? How can we do what we're doing better and make sure, make sure that this is sustainable for decades to come. And that out of that process came, well, okay, so our current facility had a lot to be desired. We're sort of at the point where we're nearing the end of the lease that we had, and we need to like figure out what we're going to do next. So we found like something just dropped in our lap where this mill space that was being renovated became available. It's like this 1830 era mill building,
Very cool.
Textile mill. So it has all the, the brick and steel and all that really atmospheric stuff that is inspiring. Instead of like, so we were in a warehouse building before that was like not inspiring. It has nice windows. It's a beautiful place to work. And it allowed us, because it was sort of just this nicely renovated but raw space, open space, it allowed us to create a new space that took all the lessons that we had learned over the last 10 years and apply it to how do we design, the architecture of the space and provide all the infrastructure that would really enhance what we can offer. So that's happening as we speak. It's, I just came from the work site, putting up drywall. It's coming together, and about a month and a half, we'll be moving in. Fingers crossed.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, Roy, bravo. I mean, it's so great. Well, before we go, first, it's been a great joy to have the opportunity to be exposed to MAXT's work and its growth and what you all are doing. Tell us, funny enough, where we can find you online and social media and website and all the rest. I know people are going to be curious to learn more.
Absolutely. MAXTmakerspace.org that's MAXT Makerspace. And then our social media, I would just recommend following us on Instagram at maxt.makerspace.
Well, Roy, thank you so much. And again, coming here from Keene, New Hampshire, where we are at the Radically Rural Conference. I'll share more in the show notes on the conference. It's definitely worth checking out this conference. It happens at the end of September every year. This next year, I'm going to look to try to maybe organize a day ahead of the conference for arts leaders specifically. I really think this is a great gathering space that a lot of us can come together and create, a little bit of our own think tank. We have a lot of think tanks in major markets, but I think there's an opportunity to create something for those of us in smaller communities out there. So thank you so much, Roy, and we'll see you next month. Thank you so much for joining us for this episode of Small Town Big Arts. Remember to rate and review us and share with your friends. To learn more, visit us at smalltownbigarts.com. Until next time, I'm your host, Jeffrey Kirshner.